I also think there's a lot of scope if there's something that you're passionate about or really enjoy, just to kind of do it. Like late 30s and 40s, if there's something you love doing, just go and do it.
Welcome to What the 40 Pod with me, Rich Rust. It's a huge privilege to welcome this week's guest, Dr. Mia Eisenstadt. Mia is a psychologist, researcher, coach, and an award-winning entrepreneur, having recently founded the Fatherli app. Mia is on a mission to help others overcome difficult situations and get the most out of life. She's passionate about fathers' mental health and well-being and the role that fathers can play in supporting the well-being of their children and families. Over the past decade, Mia's research has focused on supporting child and family mental health and reducing the risk of mental health disorder in children and teenagers through the Head Start program. Mia, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Well, it's a pleasure to have you on. Where are you today? Where are we talking to you from?
I'm based in Oxford, England. So I'm just working from home today, and I work in London as well. So I was in London yesterday, but I'm happily at home today.
Well, I'm going to do the two Brits talking to each other thing. Obviously, I don't live in the UK, so I'm going to ask you about the weather straight up. We'll get that dealt with and then we'll move on. How is the weather in the UK midsummer currently?
So it's 20 degrees. It's grey, but I actually don't mind it. It's still warm. You don't need kind of a heavy duvet at night. It's still summery, and, all the plants and flowers are just blooming like crazy. So, yeah. So I think if you're working, it's absolutely fine. You would be disappointed if you went to the beach.
Yeah, I hear you. I love that. I'm so jealous of that at the moment. It's fairly disgusting in Dubai, as you can imagine. So we're at that point of the year where you can't leave the house without needing to change your clothes or have a shower, basically. So, well, look, thank you so much for joining me. This is a conversation I've been looking forward to for a while. I guess I'd love to start by getting into Fatherli. You recently became an entrepreneur. I love the app. I downloaded it since we spoke last and since I knew you were doing the podcast. I've had a play around with it. I think it's great. So I guess I'd just love to hear about how it came about, your motivation for setting it up and how it's going.
Yeah, great. Thank you. And I'm so happy you've downloaded the app. Yeah, we'll talk about that in a minute. It'd be great. What I noticed when I spoke to a lot of young people that were really struggling, maybe with their mental health and with their lives actually, was that some of them had really difficult relationships with their parents, or their parents were going through really difficult divorces or custody battles. I also noticed that sometimes dads were less supported and that there just wasn't a kind of Mumsnet equivalent for dads. And I think, a lot of mums and dads both use Mumsnet because it's, that's sort of all there is. And similarly, there's a bunch of meeting apps for mums like Peanut, which are really good, but there's not really the equivalent for dads. And I think sometimes dads as well face a social stigma where, they may or may not talk to another mum in the playground or something for fear of it being misinterpreted. And actually, there's, since the pandemic and generally as well, there's more stay-at-home dads now, and there's more dads doing more time with their kids and wanting to spend more time with their kids. So it makes sense to give them the support, but also give them kind of a platform to meet each other and to sort of share tips and hacks and dad jokes and all the rest of it.
And what have you observed in terms of, presumably you get feedback from users? Because I think you raised some really interesting points, particularly around the willingness of dads to engage perhaps in the way that we would traditionally expect mums to. And I think the playground example is a really interesting kind of practical use case where it does often, and I guess because historically there's been more mums in playgrounds, but there's definitely a stigma when dads are in the playground. I mean, it freaks me out every time I drop off my son or pick him up. And I'm like, and you can just tell that, I don't know, men are they seem to be just naturally far worse at striking up conversation and being comfortable in that environment until they know somebody really well. So I can see why the app would work, but I'd love to know, what you've observed by way of feedback and how people are finding it.
Yeah, so I think we started off at the beginning really focusing on single and divorced dads because the situation for them is, the statistics for them is actually quite bad. They have lower mortality, like they've got, they're more likely to die earlier. They're more likely to develop some kind of addiction. They're more likely to have high blood pressure, and they're a little bit sort of left out, and there obviously are stereotypes like the deadbeat dad. And so then I think if you are a really responsible, conscientious, loving single dad, there's a risk of being construed as maybe a deadbeat dad. And so there is that sort of stigma there. So we did a lot of discussions with single and divorced dads. They were very kind of aware of stigma, and there's a real thing around loneliness. There's a real thing about grieving the family that they've lost or grieving the family home. For some of them, it was, having to kind of quickly learn like how to do like washing and cooking for kids.
Yeah.
Because that isn't what they did in the context of their marriage. For others, it was the opposite, that actually in the context of their marriage, they did a lot of the childcare, pickups and cooking, but then now they couldn't do that because they weren't seeing the kids so much.
Right. So that's a loss in itself, I guess.
That's another big loss. Yeah, if that's, it's another way of kind of contributing to your families. And then what we found, obviously the app is kind of out in the wilds, it's just on the internet. So what we found actually is we've had a lot of new dads join the app. Yeah. And so maybe in some ways, it was a reminder how overwhelming. On one hand, you think about it, it sounds simple. Okay, you just have to focus on make sure baby is fed and baby is settled and can sleep and is feeding and isn't in any pain or discomfort. But actually the reality of kind of trying to achieve those things is actually super hard, isn't it, in those first days? And I think, if you're a mum, you've been carrying a baby for 9 months, so you're just used to having a being that you're also looking after, even if it fits inside of you. But then for a dad, it's actually, okay, there's a whole new person in my life that's very dependent and has, in a way, a million needs that I suddenly need to learn, and there's no manual.
No, there's definitely not. And it is, it can be absolutely overwhelming. And I think that's a really good way of describing it. I guess the innate nurturing kind of understanding that mums have exactly through going through pregnancy, through just being in that environment. Yeah, it's a very different experience to suddenly you're just expected as a dad to kind of be there and know this stuff and do it. And I mean, you often hear people talk about the second child, and I say this only as somebody who has a 1-year-old. So I've just been through the first year again, 5 years apart from the first one. And it's quite amazing how much more relaxed you are the second time round. And you have that muscle memory of going, oh, it's okay, I know they'll survive this experience or whatever it might be. But it's daunting the first time. Yeah,
because even just small things like making sure you're supporting their head, and then occasionally there's babies that have a really strong neck, and there's just and then there's a lot of observing, isn't there, and learning when baby's tired, when baby's hungry, when baby's too hot, and trying to learn those different cries and different signs. And I think at first, it just probably all seems the same.
Yeah. Yes. And I guess the other part to that is that you can put expectations on each other in a relationship. So I guess for the dads that aren't single, that are still in marriages or with partners, then your whole dynamic changes in your relationship as well. And that's always a different one to have to negotiate.
Oh, that's such a good point. That's actually a really common question and problem that we have from new dads on the app, which is feeling, does my partner still love me? Does she still care about me? The intimacy is gone, and trying to sort of explain that this is actually a really normal part of becoming parents. And just because it's so physically and emotionally involving for mums, it can drastically just change the dynamic, and dads can feel a bit left out. And depending on the birth as well, mums can feel very much, I just want to be me and my baby recovering, and it's just different for every couple, every mother and every father. And, and there's other fathers that do seem to find it kind of effortless and sort of making that transition. And then for others, there's that big loss, like, oh, I feel like I can't go to the pub. I feel like I can't go and play golf. I feel like I'm not really being very helpful because I can't breastfeed, or I can't, make breastfeeding less painful, or, so there's just so many different kind of emotions that can go on. And it's also a time where it's quite a pivotal time for the relationship, because if the couple finds a good groove as a three, then, they're really set up for the future years as a family. Equally, I think if the couple kind of grows apart, and if they have expectations of each other, which they're not meeting, it can be quite disastrous for a relationship that was maybe before baby was functioning really well. So for me as a psychologist, I know that a kind of a loving, kind, supportive relationship between a couple is sort of the best gift you can give a child to set their well-being up for the future and to create that secure attachment. So, that's kind of what, obviously, if a relationship is not meant to be, it's not meant to be. But for relationships where both sides love each other and they do want to make it work, it's just about trying to give families a bit more extra support in that period, so that so that they feel supported, so they can last for the future. And in a way, it's funny because you think, well, it's such, animals have babies all the time, and why
Yes.
is it why is it so hard for us to be able to get through without kind of wanting to kill the other person?
It's well, I guess that's where society has played a part, because our expectations have grown in so much in terms of what we demand day to day from each other, from ourselves, from the world around us. I was just thinking as you said that about animals, it's like it's the most natural thing in the world, but then it's also the most alien thing in the world when it happens. And there's something wonderful about that as well. I've got some couple of colleagues who are about to go off on mat leave, and just seeing the excitement in their eyes and just talking to them about it, there's something truly just kind of energizing about that true kind of excitement about what happens next. And I think maybe it's part fear, part excitement, but yeah, you're so right. It's bizarre that we haven't worked it out, but maybe that's a cool thing. I don't know. It's part of the fun.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying about how kind of having a baby is life changing and life affirming. And I was in a workshop yesterday, and the facilitator, mentioned about how he had sort of two grown-up daughters, but how basically his daughters were the reason he lived, the reason he worked, the reason that was what motivated him, which is, and I'm a mum, and I would definitely say my son is my most important thing in my life. But I would also say there's other things that kind of motivate me and excite me, and we're all on this process of self-actualization. We're kind of figuring out the things that light us up inside and that we really enjoy. I know you actually do a lot of fun things in your spare time, and you have a job, and you're a dad, which is great.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because I think there is something around, for me, like there's two parts to it. One is I know that in order to be the best dad I can be and to be the best person I can be around other people, I have to carve out some of those things, because if I don't, A, it's a great stress reliever from work, and B, I'm just a better person for doing the things that I'm passionate about. And I think that's true of everybody. I mean, I would hate to suggest that I'm in any way unique in that sense, but I think it's the flip side of that. I think is when you have kids, it kind of makes you so much, you become so much more selfless, versus perhaps, for me, I think it's only been a good thing in that sense, because I think otherwise you get to this point where you could only ever focus on yourself. So, but it's a strange balancing sort of juxtaposition. But in your case, Mia, you're doing all of this stuff. You're an entrepreneur. You have a day job. You're pretty busy. So what do you do to kick back and to kind of take yourself out of that space and just kind of focus on other things?
I do a few different things. So yeah, I do actually quite a lot of meditation. I love kind of meditation as a way to de-stress and to kind of get out of my head as well, and get out of my kind of inner sort of monologue. And then I actually find blogging is relaxing for me. So I try and kind of keep abreast of different sort of trends in tech and in psychology and in parenting. And I find blogging helps me kind of organize my thoughts around things. And then I love obviously time in nature, and just relaxing and sort of focusing on sort of being rather than doing all the time. I think so much of our life we're doing. I think, the final thing is I used to be a sort of singer-songwriter, so I like to kind of write poetry or write songs or kind of work on melodies. I'm not doing that in a formal way anymore, but I do still do it in a kind of fun, just kind of going with the flow kind of way. Yeah.
Nice. And do you ever perform or consider performing, or?
I don't anymore. I did before the pandemic. I used to perform, and I've got a few songs on Spotify from around 2016, 2017.
Okay, well, I'm going to dig those out. I think we should share some of that with our listeners. I'd love to hear them.
And we try to fall in love again. And we try to feel human again.
I mean, that's such a good, as you say, like, and music's an interesting one. I think it's such a brilliant mental release, and to use the expression "take you out of your head." I think I really resonate with that. I think it's particularly, I don't know about you, but if you're somebody who naturally overthinks things, or perhaps focuses too much on small things or whatever it might be. I mean, I definitely do that, and and there's something about just taking and I think that's why I do some of the things I do, because I can just have to be present in focusing on what I'm doing at that moment, and it stops you thinking about all of the stuff that you probably don't need to be thinking about day to day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, so there's this sort of concept called cognitive load, and, the more things that we put into our brains, it sort of increases our cognitive load. And you could argue with modern life, there's so many different things to think about. So yeah, I agree, where things which actually encourage you to sort of get away from those thoughts for a while and those responsibilities are good, without obviously total escapism. You can't just sort of forget all the responsibility.
Yeah, maybe not a hedonistic retreat every weekend, but yeah, I know what you mean. But there's something refreshing and invigorating and kind of revitalizing about doing that, because I always think, actually, if you can remove your brain from any kind of stress, or to use the term cognitive load, I think that's really good, because think about computer. You only have so much RAM, right? You can at any given time. So if you can remove yourself from that and refresh, then actually it allows you to organize your thoughts to focus on things in a more effective way.
Yeah, definitely. So the other thing that we talk about at Fatherli is sort of our parenting battery, and sort of encouraging parents to think about, okay, so what out of 10, what's your parenting battery? And if you come home from work and your parenting battery is 2, that might be sort of the moment where you sort of say to your partner or someone else who's kind of a caregiver in your life, oh, can you do this with the kids right now? Because I just need to take 20 minutes or something. Yeah. And just to kind of have that kind of emotional intelligence and honesty about how we're feeling, rather than to sort of grin, try and pretend I'm at an 8. I mean, obviously there'll be always times when, we have to kind of just grin and bear it and be responsible and be a good parent and take your kids to the park even though you're just exhausted or something. But generally, I think sort of encouraging parents to think like, okay, what's my parenting battery? Okay, it's a 10. Okay, that's a great time to take my kids to a theme park for 10 hours, which was going to be a long day, and it's going to require a lot of patience and a lot of flexibility and a lot of, resilience. And equally, when you find yourself like at a 2 or something, or at a 4, what do you then need to, like you said, like top yourself up by doing things that you really enjoy and feel like, okay, yeah, I've got the resources for my family? Because sometimes we give the best of ourselves to work, and then our kind of either a partner or our children can get sort of the dregs, especially if we have like a demanding job.
So true. It's so true. I mean, I think first of all, I love that technique. I think that's really smart. And I guess that requires a whole level of trust and communication in a relationship. But I think it's a brilliant, if you can have that openness to say, I'm currently at 2, where are you? And if your partner's at an 8, you go, great, you're in charge for the next hour or whatever it might be. That's really smart. I really love that. And I have to say, like, I just think, I mean, again, it's just a sort of self lens, but, there's moments where I've kind of on a Sunday morning gone, I need to just leave the house for 2 hours. And I know that when I do that and I come back, I'm a different person, and I can be much more present. I can run around with, the mad 5-year-old who just wants to play all the time. And I think it's really, really clever. And actually, it's something I'm going to talk to some fellow dads about, because some of the conversations you have are quite interesting with them. And there's lots of commonalities over the negative sides that people experience and how they manage that energy. But I don't think people talk about it enough, to be honest.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's about like tuning into your natural rhythm, because we're all, we all have different. So with my, I often walk with my son to school, and even though I'm kind of also thinking about what I'll be doing that day, I can give him quite good quality sort of attention at that time. Whereas like 10:30, 11 at night, I'm tired if I have an early start the next day.
Your brain's done.
Yeah. Whereas, and sometimes, others, like other parents they have a sort of peak time of the day where they're actually able to be really present and really, conscious to a child's sort of needs and thoughts, because children also talk a lot.
They do. And they ask a lot of questions.
And they ask a lot of questions, exactly. And you kind of one of the other things we've been sort of talking about recently is you kind of want to keep that kind of awe and that spark alive and excitement with them. But at the same time, you can't always answer every single question or listen to every single story. So you want to keep them excited and feeling woo about the world, but without also you feeling like I can't actually organize my thoughts.
So true. You don't want to dampen their enthusiasm, but at the same time, you need to take care of yourself in order to be able to give them that as well. Yeah. Interesting. Well, look, I mean, I'd love to understand more about kind of where you're headed with it. So, how have you? Well, first of all, how have you found the journey being an entrepreneur, and are you enjoying it? And what does it look like for you day to day?
Yeah, I'm really enjoying it. We've got the MVP out, so our first minimal viable product. We got the app out on the App and Google Store, Fatherli app in February this year. And we've had a good response actually, because we now have dads from over 50 countries, and we've marketed in like 3 countries. So everything else is just organic. And we wanted it to be open to all dads in different countries. I think if we grew really big, we'd have to think about like different languages and stuff. But at the moment, it's primarily English. And the thing that we're thinking about at the moment is we notice that men are a little bit different in the way that they engage with help as compared to mums and women. And obviously there's overlap, but sort of as a trend, there's these differences. And we find that, if you go on Mumsnet or Reddit, you'll see there's a lot of kind of open posting by mums about, or Facebook groups about kind of what their kids are doing. And what we find with dads is they tend to be a lot more private. They kind of more want to talk to sort of a few other guys or maybe a coach. So one of the things we're exploring as well is kind of an AI coach where dads could speak about some of their kind of issues with an AI coach. And then if there's a point where actually then there needs to be sort of a handover to a human coach, then that would happen. So the kind of AI coach, we're trying to make services as low cost and free as possible. So potentially we're thinking of calling the AI coach Cyrano. And so then dads could talk to Cyrano and then at a certain point then speak to kind of a human coach. And we already have kind of human coaches and therapists on the app. And we're sort of inspired by this kind of Cyrano de Bergerac story where, kind of messages were fed in order to kind of win over the lady. But it can be a similar thing in that sometimes actually people don't know what to say in the right moment. So that's also what we want to kind of help dads with is, for some people it comes quite naturally, like knowing the right thing to say. But for others, sort of if like helping their child to speak about their feelings, or one of the things all parents struggle with, whether it's a mum or a dad, is being able to be present to all the different emotions of your child, because we might be able to be present. Some people are good at like their child being angry and not getting angry, or their child being anxious and not getting anxious, or their child kind of overreacting and them not overreacting. But many of us, we haven't always had the support around our emotions. So then when children have these huge, big emotions, it's actually really hard not to stay calm and not react. And that's exactly what kids need us to do is to stay calm and not react. And then it helps them to develop their own emotional regulation. So, yeah, because we find that, tantrums or either children becoming teenagers and then disconnecting with their parents, or kind of being smaller and having big sort of tantrums, and it's something that parents can really struggle with.
Yeah, I can imagine. And it's interesting you talk about AI and the AI coach. I mean, as somebody I use ChatGPT, and I hate talking about ChatGPT because I know it's like so in vogue, but I use it as like a desktop assistant for certain things. And I think there is something quite interesting about, and presumably you can take an API from one of the tools and you can it should be relatively easy to scale that. And I think that's really smart. And actually, I think people are becoming in sort of attuned to being able to prompt and ask the right questions. So actually that would, and probably works really well for dads as a rule. I mean, I would, to be honest, just hearing you talk about that and articulating the different use cases so well, I'm thinking, there's so many things I wouldn't mind just asking on a day-to-day basis. And particularly, and I think that's a really interesting one around how you react to certain situations. Yeah, it's really fascinating. And you don't have to tell me this at all. Tell me to shut up and mind my own business. But because you mentioned that you're trying to keep it as free as possible.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a kind of monetization strategy plan? Is there a model, or are you evolving it? And how does that work going forward?
The coaching on the app is paid for, so working with either a coach or a therapist is a paid service. I think as the sort of AI coach becomes more sophisticated, we could have a subscription model. I think in the early days it will be free, and then the app itself. So we have wiki kind of articles that are, so the content's quite dynamic. It's regularly updated. And then you can also ask experts or other dads things on the app, and that, I think that will stay free. But we also, another area that's linked to monetization is getting legal advice. At the moment, divorces are extremely expensive, and divorce barristers and solicitors are quite expensive. It's not always understood, actually, that it is possible to get sort of direct support from a barrister, and there are ways that you can try and make divorces lower cost. And because we're focused on sort of child well-being and family well-being, so our intent is around sort of supporting people to have either divorces or make agreements around childcare with their ex that puts the child first. And obviously, if there's a long protracted divorce that goes over 2 or 3 years, it's probably not serving the child, because it's probably a very expensive, stressful process that involves, a lot of time in court and with lawyers and so on. And so what we would like to do is we were sort of in conversations at the moment, is work more with legal professionals to enable dads to get advice fairly cheaply, but also in a way that is thinking, okay, what's the quickest and best way of putting the child first through this process of marriage ending. So that's another area that we're exploring at the moment.
And that's great. I mean, just having that, just as I'm sure as dads start to know that that's available, and that they can have either find out the right information or have conversations or get access to the right resources. I mean, the use case for your app is so overwhelmingly obvious and brilliant that I'm hope sincerely that it does get the critical mass you want, and you can really scale it, because it's such a great idea. It's so compelling.
Oh, really thank you. I really appreciate that. I mean, I think our main focus is sort of supporting and celebrating dads, and I think that comes first. But then if dads do need that kind of legal support, we want to be able to provide that as well in a way that puts the child first. The other thing we've been doing as well recently that's quite fun is Dad of the Week. So you can nominate a dad that you see is really being a great dad for their family, or is supporting other dads in other ways. Or dads can self-nominate as well. So
nice.
Yeah.
I'm the best dad of the week, or dad of the week. Yeah.
I'm sure you are. I definitely think you'd be a candidate.
Well, thank you. Definitely not this week. I'm enjoying hanging out by myself and doing fun things. But no, I think it's a really cool idea. Well, to change tack slightly, and it's a continuation of the theme, but obviously the podcast is called What the 40. The idea of the podcast initially was I really wanted to spotlight people doing epic things who happen to be 40-ish. So, and I just would love to get your perspective, and particularly as somebody who, is a parent, who is an entrepreneur, does all the things we've talked about. How have you found kind of being in your 40s in general? Has it kind of changed your mindset on how you approach things? Has it energized you? Does it terrify you? How do you feel about it?
It's a great topic, and I'm really happy that you're kind of putting more light on it, because I think it gets talked about under the guise of millennials, right? So we're kind of the old end of millennials.
Yeah.
But it doesn't. Maybe there's not enough discussion around like what it's actually like to be in your 40s. Yeah, so I'm 41, and so one of the things that I did, I guess, is I did my PhD as a mature student. So when I did my PhD, I was in my sort of mid-30s, and my peers would be in kind of their mid-20s or late 20s. And, they were absolutely great. And I love hanging out with younger people. And I was sort of aware that, there might be an evening talk that's exactly what you're interested in, but you need to go home because it's bedtime for kiddo kind of thing. So definitely there's extra responsibilities that come with, trying to do different things. But I also think there's an empowerment and there's a fun of being kind of our age compared to being in your 20s. I think especially for women as well, and there's loads of research that backs this up as well, that women experience a lot of anxiety in their 20s. And I think, obviously we still, you still worry about things in your 40s, but I think there's less, it's different. The nature of what you worry about it is very different. And I also think there's a lot of scope, if there's something that you're passionate about or really enjoy, just to kind of do it without, I think when you're maybe in your 20s, you're very influenced by your peer group. You know, you may kind of try out different things that your peers aren't interested in, but definitely as you like late 30s and 40s, if there's something you love doing, just go and do it. And there's very few things I think that we can't do. There's so many more things that we can do and get into than the other way around.
I think if you're healthy and you're lucky enough to be well, and because I don't think you fundamentally feel that different to perhaps how you did in your 20s or 30s. Maybe your knees click a bit more when you stand up, but there's so many things you can do. I think, and I hear what you're saying. I think it's about being comfortable in your skin and kind of knowing yourself, that you're less worried about perhaps being definitely about that peer group judgment, and less worried about being embarrassed by certain things. And it's so true. On that point, I did a spin class 2 days ago. I've wanted to do a spin class for like 15 years. And I was like, I'm going to do it. And I was like, I taught myself out of it for so long. It was epic. It was like a dark room, beats, DJ, this crazy woman who was just brilliant. And just like, I was like, how does she do this like all day, every day? Honestly, one of the best, transformative. I'm like, I'm going to go 3 times a week. I'm saying that now. Check in with me soon. But that's my goal. I loved it.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was doing Zumba for a while, and again, like that's a similar thing. It's like it's sort of like quite silly, but it's really fun. It's fast paced. It's good.
It's really good for you.
It's so good for you, and the mix of people. Like there was 19-year-olds. There was people in their 30s. There's people in their 40s. I mean, it's interesting as well. Like if you think like what's a stereotypical thing. I mean, I did feel like when I was doing Zumba, I was like, oh, this is a really mum gym activity to do. But then I was happily surprised that there was a really real mix of people there. But yeah, it's interesting to think like, what's stereotypical. But I think it's changing now. I think maybe the past, it would have been, I guess, maybe going to garden centres and worrying about your garden or worrying about your fence, is something. I have some roses in my garden, and I'm not actually a gardener. I'm a sort of aspirational gardener. But this week I wanted to sort of text my family to ask what to do about black spot on roses, and I was like, oh wow, this is the most middle-aged WhatsApp message I've sent.
Brilliant. And you'll find that more and more of those will start happening. I'm sure it will start happening. But it's again, I guess that goes back to that's something you actually like, and you want to see your garden improve, and therefore it's natural to do it. But I know what you mean. I think we're of a different generation, thankfully, where we don't spend our Sunday afternoons perhaps going and eating scones and going to garden centres. Although there's nothing wrong with that.
That's not appealing, though.
It does sound good, doesn't it? I'm like, there's something that, yeah, it's a very UK thing now, I think. I say that as somebody, by the way, who had a bunch of gardeners around today because I'm getting some grass installed. So I hear you on all of this.
Yeah, I mean, when the garden is looking good, it's a lovely accomplishment.
So I guess another question, sort of related and sort of not, is I'm always interested in where people seek inspiration day to day. And, given all the things that you do, whether it's particular podcasts or books or articles or whatever, and you mentioned blogging earlier, and I guess in order to blog, you need to be aware of what's current and what's going on. But where do you seek out the latest trends and insights and info that can help you day to day?
Yeah, that's really interesting, actually. Yeah, I sometimes feel like I'm a bit disappointing when it comes to the inspiration question, because I really get inspiration from a range of different places, and I'm one of these people that kind of is a sort of inner, I sort of have this inner inspiration as well. Having said that, I really like the books by Ryan Holiday. So there's a book called Ego is the Enemy. I've found that helpful during my PhD. I always find it funny because, I've studied lots of different therapeutic methods, and I just think that book is really, really helpful in trying to perform at something. I find it really, really helpful. Ego
is the enemy.
Yeah, it's really great. It's helped me a lot. It helped me through my PhD, I would say. And he doesn't come back from a sort of psychological or therapeutic background at all. So yeah, I would definitely recommend that book, and I would definitely say it's a book that's really helped me. But I think just talking to other people as well, like I love talking and listening to other people, and I guess I sort of look out for things that I know are kind of problems that are unsolved, and then I kind of look out for who's solving them. So, for instance, there's this new world coin currency that's been released by Sam Altman, who's the founder of ChatGPT for the OpenAI. And so they've just started releasing they have these orbs, and they're taking pictures of people's irises as a kind of human verification. It's one of the challenges that people anticipate we would have in the future, is that it will be difficult to tell the difference between us and a robot. So, you can take people's fingerprints, but then fingerprints can actually be removed. Or as my son has done when I'm really tired, is just taken my hand and opened my phone with it,
Yes.
Yeah, so there's this challenge of how you verify a human. And one of the things they came up with is this kind of iris scanning through these orbs, and so they have these little pop-up shops kind of around the world. And I've noticed a lot of people hate this idea and find it very like futuristic and creepy, sort of dystopian, which I'm not really going to give an opinion on that, but I think it's worth thinking through. But the thing that they've done really well that I do like is the way that they sort of capture your information. It's the coding for it is open source. So a lot of big tech companies, when a company, or any company actually, would say, this is how we use your data. We don't share it with third parties, or we actually do, or it's private to you. As a user or a consumer, you have to take a leap of faith. You just have to they're saying it, so it must be true.
Yeah, you just have to trust it. Yeah,
you just have to trust it. And what I really like about kind of what the WorldCoin have done is they've actually published their code so that anyone could go and actually see the code by which, I mean, it's not true that anyone, because you'd kind of have to be someone with some coding knowledge.
Yes. Yeah, but it's available.
Yeah, they use this other program called Semaphore, which you can see through the coding how the exact ways that they are not sharing your data with anyone else. And obviously they've taken the extra precautions because people are very worried about kind of biometric data being sold to companies. But I thought it's quite cool when you see, if you could argue that the whole world has an issue with like people's data, and even if you leave Facebook because you're like, oh, I don't want Facebook to collect my data, they'll create like a shadow profile of you of what they imagine how you might be using the internet. So it's actually very hard to kind of...
they'll just create a lookalike profile for advertising purposes or for any other purposes and just carry on as if you are there. It's so true.
So, and I just feel like we're all just trying to understand and figure this stuff out. And so it just interests me when people kind of come up with new ideas and new approaches to it.
Yeah, and the acceleration in the last, I mean, I saw some stats recently on which I thought just found the most compelling and terrifying, frankly, was when you see the investment in AI acceleration in the last 2 or 3 years versus the last decade, it's just exponential. And you can see that coming to bear through the tech that's being released and the processing speed and the power and the tech. I mean, it's all, and you used the expression, I'm not going to give an opinion on it. I think I try to live in that space as well, to the point where I'm massively excited by it. As somebody who's sort of worked in tech and marketing for a long time, I love shiny tools, and I'm genuinely excited for humans and society and the world in general in terms of what we could do with it. At the same time, you kind of go, well, actually, if you put that code base in the hands of the wrong people, then actually that's really, really quite terrifying.
No, exactly. And I think for me, one of the things that, a dad who sort of uses Fatherli the other day said, well, how do I talk about this with my kids? And that made me think, oh, well, there's, we want to help dads protect their kids and their family as Fatherli. So that made me think, okay, well, we need to kind of understand the risks that are inherent in whether it's a new cryptocurrency or whether it's different uses of AI to solve solve problems. And I do think, so I think it's, it's an evolving space, and you're right that there's also like there's a speed at which humans actually can't keep up with it. And so like I was looking in the bookshop in Brighton because I was thinking, this year we've all been talking about ChatGPT, whether it's Bing or whatever the platform, and then so I thought, what are the books that are about ChatGPT? It'd be good to get a book from a bookshop. And so I looked at this like shelf of books in Waterstones, and there weren't any on large language models. And obviously there's like tons of papers and stuff, so it's not that the information isn't there,
but nobody's written a book yet.
But it just hasn't been like kind of distributed and communicated, and it will be. So it's just a question of time. But it also feels, if you think about like the pace at which things are developing and then the pace at which they're being like documented and codified, is all captured in kind of academic research. Like that's what amazed me about WorldCoin as well. So we've published a paper for Fatherli about how we documented the app, like you said in my really nice intro, thank you, that I'm from the evidence-based practice unit, so that's how I've been taught, which is that try and capture evidence and try and publish so that you're sharing with other academics as you go. But what I saw with WorldCoin, where it's incredible, like they've already got kind of these orbs all around the world capturing data in these little pop-ups, and there is a white paper, but I don't think there's any academic papers that's been published yet with that, and in a way the scale of those pop-ups is very similar to me as the scale at which the COVID sort of testing or vaccine centers were rolled out, which was like, again, an incredible feat of the, just rolling out something
on a global scale.
Yeah. But with that, I guess there's a difference, is that there was a lot of papers and research published around it. So I mean, I'm sure that those papers and research will come, but I was surprised that research is sort of lagging behind.
Yeah, and I certainly wouldn't consider myself in any way an academic, but I can see from that perspective, you kind of go, well, hang on a second. This needs to be rooted in research and evidence-based in order to scale it in a way that is safe and sustainable and that we can all kind of get behind. So
yeah, and maybe that's something that AI can actually ironically help with, is getting research to be faster about AI trends, so that the research is being created at a similar speed to which innovation is happening. I mean, it's always been a problem, but I feel like this year it's become wild in the sense the gap between what's actually out there being used and what the research shows.
You make a good point, which is thinking about how you tell kids about it, but actually it's more about preparing our kids for it, both in terms of understanding, training, being ready for it academically, then knowing how to embrace and use it and this technology going forward. There's going to be a whole piece around that going, as well as how you regulate. All of that's massively
Absolutely. I mean, what happens when we get to the point where a child has been set a homework assignment and you type it into ChatGPT and it's done in 10 seconds?
Well, exactly that. I mean, as I said, I flippantly said I use it as a desktop assistant, but I've recently moved roles and I wanted to put together a framework this week for something around project management. And it spat out what I would have taken me like a good hour to do, which would have been 3 or 4 PowerPoint slides. It gave me all I had to do was design the slides. And I was like, this is brilliant, but it's also nuts. And yeah, in the academic sense, and how you then ensure that actually you're encouraging kids to think and to use it as a tool rather than an answer to the exam questions. All of that's going to be it's fascinating, and I think we have to live on the positive side of it and see it as a good thing. Otherwise, we're headed towards Minority Report quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think it's okay to see it as a good thing and a bad thing. It can be both. And I mean, the other thing as well is that, so I'm not really a design, like I love art and design, but I've never had any training in it. So I'm pretty terrible when it comes to like designing slides and stuff. And like you said, at the moment, that's the bit that you still need to go and sort of do yourself.
I keep asking it every few days. I'm like, can you design templates yet? And they're like, no, not yet.
But it won't be long, right? And then, then it pretty much is doing it all for us. Beyond.
And then you're getting into a world of how many hundreds of thousands of jobs are we wiping out overnight, which is a whole different existential discussion.
I think the thing to think about then is like, how can there's clearly new jobs that need to be created around oversight. So then how can the new jobs be created around kind of oversight so that we're not then ruled by AI powered robots, But then it's like, the jobs be created fast enough and people be trained fast enough?
Well, I look forward to. We'll watch this space, and we're gonna go down a whole different conversation route on this. But I will say though that one use case of kind of talking about iris scanners, I can now walk through Dubai Airport in either direction, leaving or arriving, without even taking my passport out of my bag. It's all facial recognition, and it's brilliant. But it's also, I'm in awe of it every time I walk through the airport. But I don't need any documentation to leave or to come back in, and it's just, and that's just the first iteration of sort of at scale deploying some of this technology.
But you still need to carry your passport, right? You just don't need to show it.
You need, well, technically here, I suppose you could not carry it. Yeah, legally you have to carry it, but there's no requirement to show it to anybody. But obviously the issue is the other end, wherever you're traveling to, the tech is definitely not ready for that. Although I think the UK is rolling out a new version of SmartGate soon, so who knows? But yeah, it's bizarre. It's brilliant, but also quite scary. One more question for you, Mia, and this one is much more lighthearted, and I ask everybody this, which is, what is your guilty pleasure?
My guilty pleasure. Well, I think one of the one my son makes fun of me about is bread. Like I love bread.
Eating it or making it?
I love like eating it. I love like sourdough, tiger bread, just with kind of butter or margarine and Marmite. I'm very simple, I think, actually. But I like really good white wine.
Those two things are kind of related. There's definitely a kind of yeast cousin family thing going on there. I hear you on bread though. It's amazing. It's the best thing. It's life affirming when you get a good piece of kind of fresh sourdough. Amazing.
Yeah, and I guess actually, like, I mean, trying to be sort of light but also relevant. I guess traveling in planes is a guilty pleasure, right? So, we had this week the kind of, it's now not climate, it's not global warming, it's global boiling, and we've had the reports about the Gulf Stream changing in the next 2 years, and that will obviously have a huge impact on the UK. And they're saying maybe it's going to be sort of 10 degrees colder in winters, in which case I might be moving to Dubai.
You're very welcome. We'd love to have you.
But yeah, I think, it's made me think about how, so I, didn't fly for a couple of years linked around the pandemic. And then this year I've probably flown 3 times, 3 separate trips. And it's made me feel that actually that, I love airplanes, I love plane journeys, and I love traveling. Yeah, it does actually feel like a very guilty pleasure, actually.
I think you're absolutely right, and I'm really aware of it as well. It's obviously somebody who skydives. I mean, I did a thing a couple of years ago to try and offset all of my jumps to date, which is tip of the iceberg, and really just to sort of appease my guilt. But it is something that I think about as well. But then the ability to be able to get on a plane and travel somewhere is it's just something that's become second nature, and that we all sort of expect and demand. I guess my main desire is that we can quickly come up with alternative fuels that mean we can carry on doing that forever in a sustainable way. You just can't help but think that the world isn't taking it seriously enough in all of the areas that we need them to at pace.
I would agree with that completely. And I think, I saw that Greta Thunberg had been arrested. And I just thought, wow, she's one of the few people who's been consistently a voice of reason on this topic. And this is how we're treating her. So
I know.
Obviously, people have to kind of play by the rules. But yeah, I think we need to be listening to people with the solutions for climate change.
And maybe incentivizing an acceleration, and maybe coming up with, I'm sure if, I'm just spitballing this, but I'm sure if governments around the world put up, enormous financial incentives for people to come up with ideas that could genuinely change the game, perhaps we'd see a totally different mindset. There are things that we could do to kind of incubate and accelerate this problem, but just doesn't seem to be taken seriously by governments.
Yeah, and I mean, I think sometimes the population's to blame as well. So, in the UK, for some reason, we've had loads of like backlash against wind farms and things, and other like if you go to Denmark and Sweden, they're everywhere.
It just baffles me. And also I don't even think I get it. Like, people are like, oh, there's such an eyesore. I don't think they are at all. Maybe it's just my lack of aesthetic.
But I think education around climate change is still quite basic. So, people are being told to like recycle more when, some recycling is just incinerated. And I'm a big advocate of recycling, but I don't think recycling is going to stop the boiling of, the planet. It has to be big and large scale.
Yeah, and I guess because people, the issue with that, and I think this is probably quite a UK thing as well, is I think families convince themselves that if they're recycling, they're doing their part, and actually that's the wrong exam question. You're totally right. One thing I did see here, and I'm seeing more and more, is loads of kind of big public places, particularly like golf course car parks and airports and sort of big areas where we where they have big buildings next door, are converting all the car parks to solar powered car parks, which are starting to power buildings.
Yeah.
It begs the question, why haven't they done this decades ago? But still, it's being done. So
I think I saw something like Dubai is aiming to be completely run on solar power by 2050 or something,
yeah, there's amazing stats, and the ambition and vision of this place in terms of doing that, you can believe that it will happen. It is good to see sort of tangible things changing.
I think denial is a real problem, right? Like a lot of people, their approach towards climate change is denial. And I wonder if it's just too painful. Like life is complex enough without adding, we actually have to worry about our grandchildren having a habitable place to live,
True, it's true.
I do wonder why some people live in either denial or pretending, I don't worry. If I just worry about me, I don't need to worry about everyone else.
Yeah, it's so true. I think it's also too complex. I think people can't get their heads around the nuance of all the things that it means to really tackle it, and therefore they sort of bury their heads in the sand. But
yeah, and I actually don't blame people for that. I blame the education system for that. So educators, please help.
Yeah. Mia, thank you so much for your time. Massively appreciate it. You've given up lots, and this has been a fascinating conversation. So thank you for joining.
I've really loved it. Thanks for having me as a guest, and I'm really happy that we're in our 40s together, and really glad you're spotlighting this conversation so that we can all have, obviously we've talked about a few kind of worrying things for the future, but at the same time there's a sense, we can try things out, and we might be the first to sort of experience some of these things, so at least we can try, right? So and have a good 40s.
Yeah, and lay some good foundations for the future generations, hopefully. But thank you. Really cool. Enjoyed this a lot.
Pleasure.